Hi everyone, welcome back to my knitting podcast. This is knitting podcast number 4, and today I have a few things I'd like to talk about. I have 3 finished objects, 2 whips, 2 UFOs, 2 acquisitions, and 4 autumn plans. So stick around if you're interested, and we'll just get started. So my first finished object I like to talk about is Henri the Orangutan by Cynthia Vallée. I found this pattern very straightforward and simple, and he's also just super cute. I gave him to my 2-year-old nephew and he really loves him, so it's 2-year-old approved. One thing I will say about the pattern is that I followed the pattern for the sweater right as it was written, and the sleeves came out really short, so I just did them myself how long I thought they should be, and yeah, so that's one thing I didn't follow from the pattern, but otherwise everything went pretty great. I made it out of Filco Lana Arwetta and Katia Concept Mohair on 2.5, 2.25, and 2mm needles. Next finished object is Aggie the Sheep by Cynthia Vallée as well. This one was also pretty straightforward, except I will say for the loopy vest, which was pretty torturous to make. I didn't finish it. I got about halfway through and gave up. It's not so much loved by my 2-year-old nephew, so note that. I made it using Filco Lana Arwetta like before, and using 2.5 and 2mm needles. I will say there was a pretty cool crocheting technique that I haven't tried before when making the vertical stripes on the dress, and I found that just really interesting. Some notes about just the stuffies in general. I saw that Cynthia Vallée is coming out with a new book with Lina called Chez Myrtle, and I'm definitely considering buying that. I'm also considering getting wool stuffing going forward instead of polyester. And another note, I would say that the hardest part about the stuffies is their outfits rather than their bodies, because their bodies are very similar and they have really similar constructions and techniques that you follow, and it's kind of easy to get into the rhythm of it once you start. So yeah, those are my 2 first finished objects, Henri the Orangutan and Aggie the Sheep. My next finished object is the Levitate Wrap by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I just finished today and is still blocking. I made this using Drops Air on 5, 4, and 3mm needles. My gauge was slightly off, so I decided to do a bigger size, but it still came out a bit small, and like the sleeves are pretty tight, so I wish I had made those a bit wider. I had to add extra rows to the body than was recommended, and it's still pretty cropped. I also should have done the sleeves before finishing the body to get a better idea of how it would fit, which is what I usually do, but I'm not sure why this time I decided to finish the body before doing the sleeves. So to add length to the body after I had done the double knitting on the front neckline, I decided to make a wider bottom band, which ended up being about 3 times wider than was recommended. In hindsight, this took longer than if I had just lengthened the body earlier with the increases. And just to note, I like double knitting, but even I was getting a little bit annoyed by how much there was, but I would still do it again, I think. As well, because I made the bottom band thicker, it doesn't tie into a bow, but I don't mind the look that has. Some notes on the yarn. I've worked with Drops Air before, but not long enough to know how it's going to wear. So I want to see how this top changes over time before I use it again, or any blown yarn for that matter. Overall, the finished object is really pretty, and the process wasn't a complete pain. I would make this again using a different yarn, maybe alpaca, because I like how soft that is. I do wish there was a schematic to follow just to know like how long each section is supposed to be. There are like throughout the pattern, the designer notes how long like the sleeve is supposed to be or the body, but I think a schematic would be easier to follow than that. I also haven't added the snap fasteners and don't think I will because the overlap doesn't go all the way to the side seam. It kind of hits halfway, so I don't think they would really be necessary. My final finished object is a new project bag, which I made using a pattern by Liza Taylor Handmade. I had a lot of fun doing this, and it only took me maybe 2 hours to make. I used maybe a yard and a half of fabric and batting, and I really like how it came out. So yeah, those are all my finished objects. So let's get started with my whips. My first whip is the Nova sweater by Sandnes Garn, which I'm using Sandnes Garn Tynn Pure Ghent on 3.25 and 2.75 millimeter needles. I had to redo the sweater one time because I had made a mistake on one of the rows, and now I'm at the point where I'm working on the sleeves while I put the body on hold. I'm not sure how much I love this top because I'm not sure if I even like turtlenecks, which I should have known beforehand. The 10 Pure Ghent is pretty scratchy, and when I tried it on, I felt a little bothered around my neck. I feel like I'll need to wear a turtleneck shirt underneath to make it work, but I'm worried I would get too hot in that combination. I was also wondering if I just frog the whole thing again and make a folded collar and ditch the turtleneck completely. I'm not really sure. Let me know what you think. I haven't worked on this much lately because of the Levitate Wrap, but I'm sure I'll get back into it soon. My next work in progress is the Camisole No. 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I'm using Sandnes Garn Sunday on 2.5 millimeter needles. I made a big enough gauge swatch this time and even blocked it before starting the project. My gauge is a little bit off by I think half a centimeter or a full centimeter, but I decided to make a larger size to accommodate for that, so I'm hoping that works out. I've tried making this before using Knitting for Olive Pure Silk and I hated it. I was also using the color Brown Bear and I couldn't see my stitches when I was picking them up, so the finishing came out pretty wonky and I got really frustrated and just frogged that. So I'm trying this again for 2 reasons. One, I'm using a merino wool this time in a lighter color. I decided to do this because I watched one of Florence Miller's recent podcasts, and she says that she doesn't like using cottons or silks to make her summer tops, so I'm following her advice. And I also found really helpful resources from 2 creators that have helped to give me the confidence to try this pattern again. First, Knit and Craft made a podcast and vlog regarding the Camisole No. 9 and also comparing it to the Palm Springs tank by Knit California, which I was considering getting and trying. I would recommend watching her videos for a more thorough review, although I think the Palm Springs tank has the superior finishing technique. I decided to stick with the Camisole No. 9 because I already had it in my library. Another resource I found was through Things Caroline Knits on TikTok, who made a great tutorial for an alternative way to do the finishings that doesn't require any sewing down. I'm planning on following her technique this time as it seems a lot easier than what the pattern suggests. I'm also going to block the body before I do the finishings to make sure I get a cleaner edging, and I also hope to improve my picking up stitches skill since that's probably the thing that I hate the most about knitting. Next, I'd like to talk about 2 UFOs, which involve the same yarn. So first, the Groovy Tank by Emma Yeager, which I completely frogged back because I just couldn't meet gauge and I didn't love the yarn, which I was using Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino, which I don't know, I felt too thin, I don't like the feel of it. yada yada yada. I would try this pattern again, but in a different yarn. My next unfinished object is the Isabel top by the Knit Pearl Girl. So I used the yarn that I frogged from the Groovy tank to make this, and I still don't love it. I didn't gauge swatch, which is my fault, and it came out a bit big while I was working on it and I tried it on. I've also lost my place in the chart since I put the body on hold to work on the finishing, so I just don't know where I would start if I would make this again. I would definitely try this pattern again, though maybe the open version and just in a different yarn, because it is really pretty and the pattern is well written. I also ran into some confusion, so I messaged the designer and she got back very quickly, and that helped me understand what I was knitting. And that helped me understand what I was missing. Again, I really like the Knit Pearl Girl and will probably buy one of her patterns in the future. I really appreciated her offering stitch fiddle charts to follow along with the typical static ones. Next is acquisitions, which come from Galt House of Yarn in Cambridge, Ontario. First, I got Briggs & Little Heritage in the color 22, which is this like brown heather. It feels a little scratchy, but it was very economical, and I love to support a Canadian business. It makes me consider getting a Swift and ball winder just to wind up the skeins. I measured how long it would take me to hand wind it, and it takes me around 15 minutes. So I don't know. I usually just buy commercial yarn that comes in pre-wound balls, so I'm not sure if I would really use a Swift and winder. So for now, I'm just hand winding the Briggs & Little. My next acquisition is the Drops Alpaca in the color 6309 and Philcolonatilia in the color 330. I really love these colors. I think I've just had a dusty blue kick lately, and I expect this to be a super soft combo. I'll talk a little bit about what I plan to do with these yarns right now in my autumn plans. So my first plan is to make the new Moonset Polo by Ozetta using the Briggs & Little Heritage. And then I plan to use the Drops Alpaca and Philcolonatilia to make the Honey Bucket Bag by Petite Knit. I'm not sure if I'll go through with this plan because it was a pretty expensive combination and it's just for a bag. So I'm not sure, and I would also like to make the bigger size, so maybe I could use a Briggs & Little Durasport instead. I'm not sure yet. I'd also like to make the Nova skirt by Sandnes Garn using Sandnes Garn Tynn Pure Ghent, which I already have in my stash. And finally, Dodo and Mimosa the Ducklings by Cynthia Valet using Philcolana Arwetta and Katya Concept Mohair, which I also have in my stash currently. So that is everything that I wanted to talk about today. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.